I refuse to reveal to my son that he's actually my little brother. Story. I'm well aware that this story sounds extremely hard to believe and fake, and I'm aware that there will be many trash post comments below. Sorry, but this story is 100% true, and it is a hot topic of discussion in my family at the moment. I was born when my parents were both 19, and my only other brother, let's call him Josh, was born when they were 42. They divorced shortly after Josh was introduced to the world. He was 4 months old at the time, and they both wanted nothing to do with the child. At the time, I was 23, and I was living alone with my then girlfriend who was 21, now my wife, and I'd done my best to convince at least one of them to take care of young Josh for his sake and the family's sake, but they refused adamantly and said that I should be taking custody of him instead. So I became legal guardian of my brother, and he's been living with us for the past 12 years, and things have been going really smooth for us. Josh, now almost 13, has been calling me Dad and my wife Mum, and our 2 children, 4F, 9M, his siblings, and he has absolutely no idea about his real parents. And to be honest, I let all of that slide. He has no idea that I'm really his blood brother and not his father, and I'm starting to feel guilty and a little weird. Some of my uncles and aunts come to visit occasionally, and they are really disgusted at the fact he calls me Dad, and they are surprised I haven't told him the truth. They constantly messaged me, talked to me in private, and I cannot chat to them without this one particular topic rising up, badgering me to let him know already, but I refused. I discussed this with my wife, and she thought it would be wrong to tell him the truth because none of my parents wanted to take care of him. And I'm the only person in the world who gave him the father figure everyone deserves. I feel that he has the right to know what he is to me and what I truly am to him. But he's suffered enough already, and I just want things to continue how it is. Reddit. Am I the a-hole? Would I be the a-hole if I let him know the truth? Update. About 70% of the comments are advising me to tell my son who I really am to him, and some are saying sooner than later. I've just got up to discuss this with my wife, and now after a lot of hesitation, we've decided that it's best the truth comes from us, and it has to come now. Right now, it's late for us, but we shall address this to him first thing this week, or even tomorrow. Thanks, guys. Response 1. This is a good topic to discuss with a therapist or counselor that specializes in adoption-related issues. My understanding is that it can be very distressing to a child or adult to abruptly find out that they've been adopted. Most things I have read indicate it's best to let the child know early on that they came from a different mommy's tummy and then went to their mommy and daddy, or something along those lines. Your brother is past that point, but you are better off acting on this sooner than later. It's better that he find out from you and your wife. Otherwise, eventually someone is going to spill the beans. Reply 1. Yeah, OP, you and your wife are definitely Josh's real parents. Don't let your relatives tell you different. But Josh will find out you're not his biological parents one day, and it's better if it comes from you. You're going to have to prepare yourself for that day. Reply 2. Thank you. This actually really disgusted me. His relatives are basically saying adoptive parents shouldn't be called mom and dad. What the hell is wrong with people? Not the a-hole, but please, please, please seek therapy and find a way to share the truth with your son, because it's going to come out soon with this kind of family, and that could be traumatic. Reply 3. When my mom and her brothers were adopted, my grandma got in a fist fight with her mother-in-law because they're adopted. They're not my grandchildren. They can't call me grandma. So you'd be pretty surprised how some people feel about non-biological parents raising children. Reply 4. Yes, this. Adoptive parents are parents, and that's what you are. Of course he should call you mom and dad. That's what you are. But your relatives are going to tell him about the family tree sooner rather than later. And you need to tell him about it before they do. Reply 5, or he's going to find out about it by himself. My brother's friend went to get a passport for the first time at age 19 for a college trip and found out his dad wasn't his biological father when he ordered his birth certificate. Response 2, NTA. The a-holes are your nosy uncles and aunts. You've raised him since he was a baby. You are the only paternal and your wife maternal figure he has known. But I think you'll shock him if not turn his world upside down. But given your family dynamic, it very well might be that these uncles and aunts do it because they feel he should know. So it might be best if he heard it coming from you. Reply 1. He's not the a-hole for allowing him to call him dad, but he is mildly a-hole-ish for not ever telling Josh what his true parentage is. That can do a lot of damage to a kid mentally. Hopefully, OP consults a child therapist and works with them to find the best way to tell Josh. Edit. I edited my initial comment from saying pretty to mildly. I should have proofread better and realized that was too harsh of a statement, and considering OP's age and circumstances, he did impressively well. Reply 2. Fair, but in OP's defense, he was pretty young when he started raising Josh, and I don't blame him for not knowing how to handle it at the time. Reply 3. Absolutely. He stepped up when no one else did and took on a huge responsibility. Major props to his now wife too. I hope OP decides to tell Josh soon though. Reply 4. Know what else can do a lot of damage to a kid mentally? Finding out neither of your parents loved you. I don't know if there is a right answer for this one. It's going to be hard no matter what. Reply 5. But it's not like it can be kept a secret forever. Josh will take a DNA/ancestry test one day and find out he has 0% of whatever his mom's family is. Or he'll need his birth certificate to apply for a passport or something. Or he'll stumble on a book of photos and wonder why his mother wasn't pregnant before he was born. Or one of his bio parents will change their mind and call him up. It's going to happen. The OP can only control how it happens. Response 3. Natch. I completely get where your uncles are coming from. The little guy deserves to know the truth, but it doesn't have to be now, and it certainly doesn't have to be explained as your parents wanted nothing to do with you. When he's older, you can explain some version of, when you were born, our parents were going through a really rough divorce, and neither of them could take care of you. I loved you so much that I wanted to raise you as a son. You have been the best thing that has ever happened to me, and I'm so glad to have you in my life. I know this is a lot to take in, and you might have a million questions, or you might need some space to digest all of this. I'm here for you, whatever you need. Reply 1. This is honestly a great way to tell him. Part of me is saying that I should tell him this right now before my other relatives tell him, in a much worse manner. But at the same time, part of me is saying, hey, I think it's a little too early, and this is exactly what is tearing me apart. Reply 2. It's definitely not too early. Common wisdom is that you start telling a child as soon as they can start to understand about mommies and daddies in an age-appropriate manner. And you definitely want to be the one to tell him, so you should really do it sooner rather than later. Reply 3. He's getting to an age where he will need his birth certificate for things. He should be told before he stumbles upon it himself. Reply 4. Wish I could upvote this a million times over. My boyfriend had a pretty female-up adoption story. He had 2 birth certificates, but they accidentally gave him the original one when he went to get his learner's permit, and that's how he found out. Did a lot of damage, and I think he still holds a lot of resentment towards them. Reply 5. If he's been legally adopted, don't they issue new birth certificates with the adoptive parents listed as the mother and father? Response 4. NH. This is a really hard one, OP. I found out at 28 years old that my dad is not my biological father. Everyone knew except me. What that meant was that for 28 years, every time I went to a doctor, I gave them a false medical history. That I felt rejected my whole childhood by who I thought were my half-siblings. They knew the truth. I thought it was because something was wrong with me. It meant that any time, the wrong person could have let it slip. If I had have sent in that 23andMe test I had sitting around, I would have found out. If I found out my dad's blood type, I would have realized something was wrong. It meant that I had to face the fact that for 28 years, every single person I was related to had lied to me about my own identity. I didn't care that the bio-father wanted nothing to do with me. The man who raised me stepped up when I was a baby and never stopped being my dad, even though him and my mom split up when I was a baby. Hard to imagine being more loved and wanted than that. It's a very difficult truth to tell someone, but lying to your kid until someone eventually lets it slip is the wrong way to go about it. He deserves to know his own identity. It doesn't have to be about him being unwanted by his bio parents. They recognized they didn't have the ability to raise a child, so you and your wife very happily became his parents and are so happy and thankful to have him as a son. It wasn't that he was rejected by someone, it's that he is extremely loved by people who chose to raise him. As far as people taking issue with him calling you guys mom and dad, screw that. You're his parents. Response 5. To add to what /you/Christina0001 said, your brother is now what is called a late discovery adoptee. This can be incredibly traumatic for people because they learn that they've been lied to, however well-intentioned, their entire life. This is going to break his trust and rattle his sense of self and family. But the sooner you tell him, the better, because the longer you wait, the longer you'll have been lying to him. And in this day and age, he will find out eventually. I'd highly recommend you line up therapy for him with a therapist who specializes in adoption and late discovery adoptees. This website has some good resources on late discovery adoptees to get you started. /topics adoption /adopt people /discovery. Reply 1. First 3 links are down, but last 2 are solid. My usual response to someone telling me they're adopted. Oh, so your parents picked you? Yeah, my parents got stuck with me. Reply 2. It's even harder. Because when I found out at 14, I wasn't even really adopted. There had been no legal paperwork, just everyone keeping the secret. I had their last name. They forged a birth certificate. I do think it would have been easier if I could have said, well, at least I was adopted. Response 6. NTA for allowing him to call you dad/mom. You are his guardians and the one raising him. And if that's what he's comfortable with, it's really not anyone else's business. YDA for not telling him the truth. He's gonna find out. Someone else will slip up, purposefully or not. He'll see his birth certificate, which he'll likely need when he's old enough to get a driver's license, for example. Or he'll do one of those DNA kits. You cannot keep this a secret forever, and it's 100% better that he finds out from you than an unfortunate surprise from someone else. Reply 1. I'm gonna have to disagree a bit. I agree that he should tell him, but he's not TA right now for keeping it from him. He would be TA if he continued keeping the secret. However, judging from OP's comments, that's not likely to happen. Reply 2. I think we can give OP a bit more understanding that he was 23 when this all happened, and clearly didn't get much support or help from his own family. And he is open to learning and obviously wants to do what's in the kid's best interest. Not the a-hole to me in that context. Response 7. NH. I think this is above our pay grade. There is so much to consider in telling or not telling. Ultimately, I think the truth is best because at some point he is going to find out anyways. But be ready for a lot of backlash if you tell him. He is going to feel angry and hurt and abandoned by his bio parents. When it comes right down to it, you are his dad, even if you are biologically his brother as well. And good for you for stepping in and being there for him. Reply 1. I agree. This is a situation for a professional to guide you through step by step. A child's sense of self vary from stage to stage, which may affect how you approach the discussion with your brother. This is why a professional will know how to best handle the situation. Response 8. So this might be hard to believe, but I grew up in a very similar situation. Around 14, I learned that my parents were actually my grandparents, and my older sister was actually my biological mother. It was a lot to deal with. Honestly, there were a lot of times that I wished I never knew that. But now I'm 22, and at the end of the day, my parents are my parents, and my sister is my sister, and I love them all. They genuinely wanted to do what was best for me. That being said, I don't think you'd be the AH if you told him. The most important thing is for you and your wife to be there for him as his parents. He will be hurt that his biological parents didn't want him. Remind him that you want him, and tell him all the ways that having him as your son has made your life better. Tell him that you are still his dad as long as he wants you to be. Response 9. seconding the advice to talk to a counselor first about the best way to approach. But yes, you need to tell him, and sooner than later. Similar to any other adoptee, he has a right to know his story. And if he wants to keep calling you dad, that's his choice. And wouldn't it be more meaningful to you both? Response 10. Tell him. He's old enough now to hear it. Source: a guy who didn't know one of his parents wasn't his parent until he was 25. Reply 1. Agreed. My husband just found out his dad isn't his bio dad, and he's nearly 40. It devastated him, and it was worse to him that everyone knew but him. OP. If you ever see this, the omission of the truth is so much worse and feels like such a stronger betrayal than the truth. Not the a-hole, but tell him as soon as possible. Response 11. And because you were thrust into a carpty situation by terrible people. However, you have made a huge mistake, not telling your brother in age-appropriate ways what your relationship is. It may still be he would want to call you mom and dad, but you have basically set a time bomb that could very well alienate him from you. I have seen multiple situations like this one, where a child alienated themselves from well-meaning people after finding out the well-meaning people lied to them about their parentage. Do you honestly think he's never going to find out when you have aunts and uncles who are openly disgusted with you? Someone is going to reveal it to him in a fit of meanness, and it's going to really F your carp up for years thereafter. Get ahead of this before that occurs. So, as I said, you're not the a-hole, but why do you be AFM if you did not fix this before it gets fixed for you? Response 12. NTA, you are his dad, despite not being his biological father. You have taken him in and raised him and provided a loving, supportive home. You seem like you'll tell him about his bio parents in due time. Let him mature and wait until he's ready. Response 13. Jesus, this is a tough one. I'd say no a-holes here. He should know the truth, but if it works, then it works. Maybe tell him when he's 18. He won't benefit from knowing that you aren't his dad. It could lead to resentment for lying to him about his real parents, and his real parents don't want him anyways. Reply 1. Not necessarily disagreeing one way or the other, not sure there's a right answer here. But why would it be any better when he's 18? The resentment would surely be higher, and he'd likely be at a stressful period of his life where lots of big decisions and changes are happening already, leaving school, getting a job, or going to uni, etc. Maybe it's better to get it out of the way sooner than later, instead of waiting until he's an adult who could cut off all contact out of anger. Not that 13 is a greatly stable age either, I'll admit. Reply 2. I kind of err on the side of tell potentially devastating/traumatic stuff earlier, while the stakes are low. At say 16, you've got a kid who should be concentrating on school and college and grades. If he decompensates and acts out, it can F up his ability to focus on these things. At 18, he's an adult. His reaction might be bigger and the consequences might be bigger. Any trouble he gets into while acting out will be worse, and there's a chance he just checks out and leaves because he's 18 and knows he can. At 12 or 13, the stakes are lower if he has a bad year at school. He has time to pull it back. If he gets in trouble, he's a minor with lesser consequences. He can't leave legally, so you deal with the fallout now as a family. I wouldn't wait, because there's no good time, there's just worse results. I'd probably sit him down and be honest. Your mom and I may have messed up. We should have told you this sooner, but we didn't know how, and we were so young when we became your parents. We were still learning. We are still learning, and we know now we should have done this differently. You can be mad or sad or just not want to talk about it for a while. But when you do, your mom and I are here to listen or answer questions. And we promise to not make a mistake like this again. We might make others, but we will always be honest with you because you're old enough now to know what goes on in this family and have an opinion. Reply 3. Personally, I think 18 is too late, especially because around 18 is when most kids go off to college. They'll be dropping this major piece of information on him, and he has to deal with the moving, college, adoption stress all at one time. I think they should tell him soon. 13 is old enough, but if they want to wait a couple of years, that's also fine. This gives him time to process the information at home, time for the family to attend therapy if they need, and time for him to ask all the questions he wants. Response 14. Sometimes when people have a baby, they know they can't take care of it like the baby deserves. They find people who would be amazing parents and ask them to raise and love the baby. Well, when you were a baby, my parents were divorcing. Neither of them were stable, and they were older. They knew they couldn't provide the life you deserved, and I could. So they asked Mom and I to love and raise you as our own. We loved you so much already, we said of course we would. We have loved you as if we made you every single day since then, and never for a moment regretted it. NTA. It sounds like eventually you'll tell him the truth, but that doesn't have to be right now, when it could potentially be devastating for him. Response 16. NH. I was adopted by my grandmother when I was 2 days old. I found out when I was 9 years old. I hated knowing. I would have given anything for them to never tell me because it changed nothing except give me issues with relationships later on. She was my mother all the way up to her death in September this year. Nothing that they told me would change that. If you want to tell him, do so, but specify that this doesn't change the fact that you guys are happy to be his parents, if that's what he wants. Please be careful. Reply 1. I'm extremely sorry for your loss, and I'm aware how delicate this subject is and how it needs to be approached with caution. Really, what I want to know is, did your parents ever give you any kind of child support? Or did they just leave you high and to raise him yourself? A little late, but I'm hoping he doesn't lose a father, but in fact finally gets to know that he has the best big brother in the world. Response 19. Nah, man, OP, that's a really hard one. Of course, he deserves to know the truth, but it makes sense that you wish to protect him from feelings of abandonment and betrayal. I think the longer you keep it from him, the more betrayed he will feel. This is defined going to be rough on him for a bit either way. Response 20. Nah. You've done the best by your brother. If anyone is the a-hole, it's your parents for ditching him. Where are they now? Sooner or later, though, he will find out. He will need a birth certificate when he gets a driver's license, right? Or one of your uncles will say something. It's better he hears it from you.